teach you concepts of midot, how to be a better person. But the main focus in this school, obviously, is to teach you skills, how to learn. So for that, you don't need me. I'm not that good in that. Anyways, you got excellent teachers. But actually, we're going to discuss. Guys, can I please ask you to put things away? Just let's pay attention for a few minutes. Honestly, we're doing good stuff. What we're going to discuss, actually, there are certain things that we will come across them in our lifetime. Definitely. And as you know, young children, because we haven't gone through experiences of life, sometimes we are not sensitive. Again, many of us are, but sometimes we are not. When we go through the hardships of life, sometimes, unfortunately, you got to go through it. So at least one of the experiences of life teaches us to be more sensitive to others. So last week's parsha of Mishpatim, it speaks about different types of people that we cannot annoy them or actually financially hurt them. Now, as you guys know, we learned about Lashon Hara a while ago, right? That if somebody speaks Lashon Hara all his life, he might transgress 31 sins. I could say, well, Lashon Hara once, and I'm transgressing 4 or 5 things. So we're used to that. A person could do one action, but the mitzvah might be a double mitzvah. He's doing 2 mitzvahs at the same time. Or if it's a negative thing, he's doing 2 sins at the same time. For example, if we rest on Shabbat, you're doing 2 mitzvot. The Torah says, Lo ta'asa kol melacha, don't do any work. And the Torah says, Tishbot, you have to rest on Shabbat. So when somebody rests, that's positive, negative. If God forbid he does go to work, he's transgressing, 2 negative commandments. No, I'm sorry, 1 negative and 1 positive. That's what's happening. So now let's talk about this. The Torah says about certain people that have nobody to protect them. So we might be more, less careful not to hurt them. One of the groups are the converts. The Torah says, "Lotone tager ger lotonu," which means do not abuse them verbally, don't victimize them verbally. And then it says, "Lo tilchatzenu," don't hurt them financially. Now, aren't they Jews? If somebody converted to Judaism, according to the Torah, he's a Jew. So why is the Torah telling you not to hurt a ger? So here the Rambam says, all the people that count the mitzvot, if I hurt a ger, I'm doing double sin. First of all, he's a Jew, and also he's a ger. Another thing that the Torah says, it talks about an orphan and a widow. It says, Kol almana ve'yatom lo ta'anun. Do not hurt any orphan or any widow. So here the Ramban actually brings an interesting Medrash or Gemara. What does it mean, any type of a widow don't hurt? But let me go back. So one thing I forgot. Aren't they Jewish and the Torah says don't hurt any Jews? Of course. But if that Jew happens to be an orphan, or if it happens to be a widow, it's a double sin. So now, what does it say? Kol almana, all types of widows. How many types do we have? A woman lost a husband is a widow. A child, God forbid, loses a mom or a dad, is an orphan. What do you mean kol almana, any type? So here the Ramban says, what happens if this widow is a wife of a king? She has no financial problems. We think, widow is a poor lady, she has no money. God forbid, a child who's an orphan, poor guy, has no job, has no money. What happens if these people are wife or children of billionaires? They have no financial problem. She has no problem. She lives comfortably for the next 50 years of her life. But again, the problem is not money. The problem is that they're heartbroken. And that's what the Torah says, call, even if it's a rich one. So I wanted to share with you actually a couple stories. They're mostly about, there's one story of Chafetz Chaim about an orphan, and there's not a bunch of other stories about a widow. Halacha says you have to be, not only don't hurt them, you have to be extra careful with them. But let's say if a child makes trouble and you want to discipline, it says if it's an orphan, if the woman is a widow, you got to speak more soft. Don't be so, offensive or harsh to them. So let's go through a couple of stories. One of them is two of them is Rabbi Sar of Salant. I'm sure all you guys have heard about him, the person that started the whole movement of Musar. So, he had one of his students that the student really wanted to invite him for Friday night, for Shabbat. But again, Rabbi Sar of Salant didn't go to anybody's house. So the student comes and says, Rabbi Sar, listen, I buy the meat from this shochet, whatever. Those days the shochet used to sell. The one that shochet used to sell it. It says the guy that sells the meat is Yireh Shamayim, he's a tzaddik, no questions about his meat. Not only that, in our house, no dvarim betelim, we don't talk about nonsense politics. Everybody in the family says that Dvar Torah between the meals, between the fish and the soup and the chicken, whatever. Persians are different than Ashkenazim. Persians bring everything at the same time. Ashkenazim take their time, First is kiddush, then gefilte fish, then you sing, right? And then there's soup, and then there's chicken, and then there's two types of dessert. Right? As soon as you have like 5, 6 times, first is the cake, then there's the ice cream, then afterwards is bika samosa. So it says between each meal, we actually sing zmiras. And then, you know who my cook is? The one that cooks and prepares the food for us and serves it is an almana. It's a widow. She's a widow. But she's the wife of a big Talmid Chacham. When guy, I mean, he's dead now. Good.
Oh, thank you.
So definitely the husband, you have such a tzaddik as a husband, she's careful with everything. So Rabbi Sor Salan says, no problem. How long does your Sauda take? He says, usually goes till midnight. They do better than the Persians, Persians go till 10:30, 11. They don't go till midnight. This guy went till midnight.
Wait, why does he go till midnight?
Because they sing, they say Torah. So Rabbi Sor Salan says, on one condition, you're going to cut it 2 hours short. You got to finish 2 hours before midnight, or whenever you finish. So he wasn't happy, but he loved that Rabbi Sor of Salant. Okay, I'll do that. So as soon as they come in, the Rabbi Sor of Salant comes in. So what happens is they say Kiddush, and he says, no, fast. Wash your hands, fast, bring the first course. Before they even had too much time to sing, they made it very short, bring the next course, and he quickly finished it. So the student, the Talmud says, Rabbi Sor, listen, Rabbi Sor, I'd love to have you, but could you tell me why you made it so short? What's wrong with Zmiras? What's wrong, with saying the Divrei Torah? So he says, you know what? Bring the cook inside. So they call the cook. And then Rabbi Sor says, I want to apologize. Usually I have a lot to rest between meal, but I rushed you to bring everything very, very quickly. Please forgive me. So the lady says, no, Rabbi Sor, please come every week. So he says, why? He says, because she's a widow. I have to work very hard every day in order to bring parnasa for my children. By the time this family finishes, this 12 midnight, I have no energy in my body to walk back home. I'm like devastated, whatever, physically, not able to go. Now that you finished it 2 hours earlier, I'm able to go home at a normal time. I have energy to walk back home. So Rabbi Saul told the student, it's very good to have a spiritual Shabbos. It's beautiful, but not on the cost of somebody else. So again, he wasn't harassing the widow. What's funny, guys?
No,
Okay, nothing. Do I look funny? No. Forgive me. So anyways, so it says, he wasn't harassing the widow. No horses here, huh? You're all human beings. That's for horses. Right? Anyways, so he says like this, he wasn't harassing the woman. She was actually getting paid for the job, but it wasn't sensitive enough. That's story number one. Story number two, Rabbi Sor Salant used to be mashgiach on the matzahs that were made for him, for Pesach. One time he couldn't go. So he asked his students to go and be mashgiach on the matzahs that are made for him. So the Talmidim said, Rabbi Sor, you're a holy man. Do you have any chumras, any strictnesses that you keep for the matzah? I says, yeah, I'll tell you. Number one, the woman that prepares the dough, she's a widow. Don't scream at her to rush. You know what I'm saying? Because the widows, whatever.
A widow is when her husband dies or her father dies?
A widow is when the husband dies. Orphan is when the father or the mother dies. You speak Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
A widow is an almana.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So anyways, what happens is, he said number one is do not hurt them. Actually, Rab Chaim of, what's his name? Rab Chaim Oizer was a big tzaddik from Vilna. He says that, people want to hire widows to give them some money. And usually, in the olden days, you didn't have regular people baking matzahs. And nobody wants to go stand by the heat of the oven. I went myself to a matzah factory when I was a little kid. In New York, honestly, most of the people doing the dough were older women. Most probably either older women or widows. So it says when you hire somebody to give them parnasa, it's a good thing. But if you're going to scream at the widow, you're doing a bigger sin. Don't do that. Another thing that actually we find with the Chafetz Chaim, the older days, I'm going to finish after this. You guys didn't have time to eat. There was one time, in Russia, so the Tsar used to send the Communist Party, whatever it was, or the Tsar, he used to send people to go and take soldiers, little kids, as soldiers for the Russian army. Now these guys had to gather a certain amount of kids. So they'll come, to the villages and just grab a kid when it was 11, 10, send them to the camp. And actually they were for 25, 30 years in the army. A lot of them were Jews. By the time they came back, many of them had no idea they're even Jewish. So one time they came and they grabbed the Jewish kid. The father was rich. So he went to the policeman that grabbed this kid and he said, here, this is a lot of money. give my son back. There is an orphan kid there, doesn't have parents. Go catch him. Chafetz Chaim heard about it. As you guys know, Chafetz Chaim loved all Jews. He was a great, great tzaddik. But one thing he said, he did this, he's going to pay for it. You never heard such things from the Chafetz Chaim. He gave an orphan to the hands of the army, he's going to pay for it. What was the end of the story? The son got a disease that was contagious and he died. To such an extent that the Chevre Kadisha didn't even want to bury the child because they were scared they're going to be contaminated. He had a disease that was contagious.
What did they do with it?
So the father himself had to go buy a plot and bury his own son. The kid didn't do anything, but because the father did a sin with somebody else's kid, Mida can I get Mida? God punished the kid. Nothing. I don't know. That you have to ask God. Honestly, I don't know. That's God. You have a very strong question in ways of God. Moshe Rabbeinu had the same question too. I don't know, but that's what happened. But again, guys, I just shared this story. And honestly, again, I know myself, my father died many years ago. So I have to respect my mother as a mother, and I have to be very, very careful because she's an alman at the same time. Some of us might be that way. If not in this class, thank God everybody's parents are both alive. We might have classmates that they don't have either a father or a mother. So the child might be a yasum. Yasum is a yatom, is an orphan. Or let's say some of us might not have the father alive. So our own mother is an almana, or our grandmothers could be, they are widows. We have to be extremely careful with them. They might have, their desires. They might sometimes, talk to you loud. They might say something you don't like. But to a mom and to a widow, we have to shut our mouths. And God will pay you the reward for sure, 100%.